right, we're finishing the reading of this Shabbat, which is actually, I don't think we're actually going to finish it, but we'll get a good part of it. It talks about the Jews actually leaving Egypt. Last week we read about 7 of the 10 plagues. This week we read of the last 3 terrible plagues. the hail and the darkness and the firstborn dying. I'm sorry, the arba. I'm sorry, the locusts and the darkness and the firstborn. The hail we learned last week. And now Moses just went and warned Paro that that's it, the firstborn are going to die. So you better let us go. And this is what he's telling. He's telling Paro, OrHachiam the Negofet Mitzrayim. God says, God is telling Moses, put the blood on your door, on the inside of your door, and God will smite all the Egyptians. Yeah. He'll see the blood on your mashkof. He'll see the blood on the overhang of the door and on the 2 sides of the door. And God will jump over Pasach on the opening, and he will not allow the destroying powers to come into your houses and destroy. Because on that day, not only was God killing the firstborn, but there was also powers of destruction roaming around on the streets. So God said, don't have to worry about it. God said, for you, don't worry about it. The Jewish people, and even Jewish people that didn't put blood on the houses, but they were in the houses of Egyptians, they also wouldn't get smitten. And if an Egyptian put blood on his house, you would get smitten. So really the blood was basically just to show the Jewish people that they were serving the Creator. They were doing their part. And it says you should do this for you forever. What should you do forever? The Passover offering, not putting the blood on the doors. This is the only generation that put the blood on the doors. It was never done after that. Only the first Passover. And also taking the Passover goat or lamb into the house 4 days before, that was also never done again. This is the only generation it was done. Okay, this is where we're starting off. We got up to here yesterday. God said, when you come into the land, God is speaking to Moses, when you come into the land of Canaan, Asher Yitain God, that God gave to you, Kasher Diber, like he said, Ushmartem at Avodah Zes, and you should do this service. I'm sorry, this is not God speaking. This is Moses speaking to the elders of the Jews to give over to the Jewish people. Right? Let's just go just to this one sentence. Moses spoke to the elders, and he said to them, Mishchu, take yourselves away from idolatry and take a sheep to your families and slaughter the Pesach offering. And when you come to the land of Israel, that God will give you, Moses is speaking to the elders, right? Like he spoke to you, and you should keep this service. Now, when did the Jewish people get into Israel? The fact is they were supposed to go into Israel almost immediately. They were supposed to leave Egypt and go to Mount Sinai, receive the Torah, and immediately go to the land of Israel. They were supposed to be by the time of the next Passover, they were supposed to be in Israel, but they didn't. The Jewish people started complaining, and they didn't want to go across when they got to the Red Sea. That was only 7 days after they left. They got to the Yam Suf, and they didn't want to. They got afraid. They wanted to go back to Egypt, etc. So therefore, God schlepped it out for 40 years, being in the desert. In any case, whenever it was, you go to the land of Israel, like God promised you, and you should keep this service. Rashi says, the Torah connects this commandment of doing Passover with going into the land of Israel. They were not obligated the whole 40 years they were in the desert to do the Pesach offering, except for the second year they went in. The second year, in other words, they did this Passover in Egypt, then they got out, and a year later they did it also, but that God commanded them specially. Like God said, Kasher Diber, like God said, when did God say it? It says he said it, Heveti etchem la'oretz, God said, I will bring you into the land of Israel. So he says, what did it mean that God said only when they went into the land of Israel? So when the fact is that when they did get into the land of Israel, I'm just paraphrasing what the OrHachiam says. When they did finally get into the land of Israel 40 years later, is God commanded them again. B'shana shenis lasos haPesach. It says God commanded them to make the Pesach properly in all of its. Why? So he says the reason is that when they left Egypt, they should have gone immediately after receiving the Torah. They should have gone into the land of Israel. The second Passover, in other words, in the second Passover, in other words, 1 year after they got out of Egypt, they should have already been Israel for a while. So that's what happened. They made trouble, but the fact is they made trouble for God when they got to the Yam Suf, and it said, like it says, V'yamru al Yam b'Yam Suf, like it says in Psalms, that the Jewish people rebelled when they got up to the Red Sea. So therefore, when God saw what they did, and they were in the desert, so therefore, God had to command them again when they were in the desert, the second year, that's what it says. And it was the second year after they left Egypt, so God had to command them again to make the Passover, because God thought that this first one would be that they did in Egypt, and that the second one would be in the land of Israel. And this is the command for the land of Israel, when you go to the land of Israel. But it ended up they didn't go to the land of Israel because they made so much trouble for God. So God had to command them again, right? Don't wait till you get to the land of Israel. Do it right now. So they did. So the first Passover they did in Egypt, the second Passover they did in the desert, and then they passed 39 more years, and they didn't do the Passover until they came into Israel, then they did the next one. And it will be, right? Moses is still speaking to the elders to tell over to the Jews. And it will be when your children ask you, what is this service? What is this? What are you doing? Now also this word v'haya usually means something happy. Usually vayehi is something not good. And it says v'haya. And also it says that the son, this is talking about the bad son. What is this to you? But we'll discuss this afterwards. In any case, it says when your son, and you should say, Zevach Pesachu, this is a Passover offering. When your future generations, you're going to go into the land of Israel, the future generations, your grandchildren are going to say, what is this thing that you're doing? You're going to say, this is the Passover offering because God passed over the Jewish houses when he destroyed Egypt, and our houses he saved. And it was passed this down from generation to generation. 3,300, the Jews got out of Egypt, 3,300, and this coming Egypt is going to be just a couple months, 3,334 years ago. We got out of it, and the Jews have been relating this story since then. The Yekodam and everybody bowed down and they prostrated themselves. They were all very happy. Why were they happy? Because they got, first of all, they got happy because they were going to go to the land of Israel, be at the Oretz. They were going to get Gura the Gula. They were going to get out of Egypt. They were going to go into the land of Israel, and also that they knew that they were going to have children. They were going to have children in Israel. That's what it says. You're going to tell the children It means you're going to have children. When are you going to tell them? When you get to the land of Israel. What are you going to tell them? That God took us out of Egypt. So from this, the Jews know they were still in Egypt, right? When Moses told them this. They didn't go out yet. We'll see. Israel, and the Jewish people went and they did. Moshe, what God commanded Moses and Aaron, that is what they did. What did they do? They sacrificed the Pesach offering and everything they said. Well, that doesn't make any sense because this, what God was saying, this message that Moses was giving, this was 4 days before. Here, look, it says, they already did. It says the Jewish people went and they did what Moses said. They sacrificed the lamb and everything. This is not so. Halomi Rosh Chodesh Namar. This was said to them 15 days before they did it. It was said on the first day of Nisan. So why does it say they already did it? Because they accepted on themselves. In other words, they made the resolution that they're all going to do it. The Torah treats them as though they already did do it. That's what it says. And they went and they made the Passover offering. Just the going, this is also, it gives them reward. That they're going to do it, all the preparations they made to make the Pesach offering, and actually doing it is an extra reward. And this, they hadn't really even gone and done anything. This is already 15 days before they left Pesach. Like God commanded Moses and Aaron, this tells you the praise of the Jewish people, that they did not lack one thing, what Moses said. What does it mean? And Cain asu, so they did. What do you mean, so they did? Rashi says Moses and Aaron also did. Everything Moses and Aaron told everybody to do, they did themselves. So it says, Vaya asu, you have the Baal HaTurim, Yaakov Baal HaTurim. By the way, Yaakov Baal HaTurim, he wrote a book which is called the Tur. And the Tur was a summary of all of the practical laws that the Jewish people do know. And he gave chapters, and he divided up into 4 sections. And this division that he made, that's from afterwards, the big Shulchan Aruch of Joseph Caro was divided according to the same amazing genius. And he said, it says 2 times, Vayilchu vayasu, they went and they did, and so they did. 2 times they did. It already says that they did. Why 2 times? So he said, one is that they did the sacrifice, the Paschal lamb, and the other one is that they circumcised themselves, because an uncircumcised person cannot eat from the Korban Pesach, from the Paschal offering. So they circumcised themselves that very night. They were going to leave Egypt in just a couple of hours. They were leaving Egypt in a couple of hours, and the men all circumcised themselves. We're talking about grown men. It makes no sense how they did it, but they did it. And it was in midnight, and God smote all of the firstborn in the land of Israel, from the firstborn of Paro, sitting on his throne, to the firstborn of the slaves that were in the prison, and all of the firstborn of the animals. Every time when it says Vahaya, means God and his heavenly judgment, heavenly court. He smote all of the firstborn, even if there happened to be another nation there, not Egypt. If there were any other firstborn of any other nation that happened to be visiting in Egypt, he also got it. The firstborn of Paro, and in fact, Paro himself was a firstborn. He was the only one that was left from this plague. Why? Because it says in order that everyone should know who was everyone, was Paro. He was the only one that was left from the plague. You saw all the firstborn dying all around him. It says even the firstborn of the prisoners, if there was a prisoner that happened to be firstborn in his family, it says why? Because they were happy when the Jews were suffering, right? They were suffering in prison, but if they heard that the Jews were suffering, they enjoyed it. They enjoyed it. That was the talk of the prison, how the Jews were suffering. So therefore, they got punished also. And also, they shouldn't say, the prisoners shouldn't say that our God right, is taking mercy on us. We were unjustly put into prison. So the God of the prisoners is smiting the Egyptians. So God smote them also. So why does it say the firstborn of the, earlier it said the firstborn of the handmaiden, the least of all and the highest of all, even Paro, etc. They were all smitten. Yeah. A lot of these is just going to be Rashi. Paro woke up in the night, him and all of his servants and all the Egyptians. There was a big scream in all of Egypt. There was no house that there wasn't somebody dead. Why was there nobody dead? I mean, there were maybe the houses where the firstborn left. He got married. He moved out, right? Every house had a firstborn in it. So here he says that Daat Zkainim says that the firstborn, people buried their children the firstborn, they would bury them in their backyard. So they would pop out of the ground. So every house had one. That's what he says. Rashi says a little bit more sordid. He says, there's no house that there was nobody, nobody died. Why? Because if there was no firstborn there, then the leader of the house is also called the Bechor, means like the chosen one of the house. He would also die. Like God says, I am making you into the choice people of all the world. God said to us. Another thing, another explanation, all of the women were, I say, licentious. They had relations with young men, as many as they could. So therefore, a lot of times one woman would have 5 children that would be firstborn. Sometimes there were 5 children to one. Each one was the father to his own. So it was from this young person and this young person. People had firstborn from their own sons. Who know, anything that went that is done, that could be done, was done. So Paro, he's running through the streets, and all of a sudden, and there was a big scream, and they're looking for Paro. Says he crawled by Yikra Moshe Aaron. He called out to Moses and Aaron in the nighttime, and he said, "Get up, get out of my people, you and all the Jewish people. Get up, go and serve your God, like you said." This tells you that, says Rashi, this tells you that Paro was running through the streets, knocking on the doors and screaming, "Where is Moses? Where does he live? Where does Aaron live?" Right? So Paro said, "You can go, everyone you wanted to. The older people, the younger people, take the sheep. We'll give you sheep. We'll give you anything you want. Just please get out of here." It says maybe he wanted to get rid of them because there were some Jews that they wanted to stay in Egypt. Now remember, all the Jews that wanted to stay in Egypt, they died in the plague of darkness. They died in the plague of darkness. And nevertheless, these Jews that were left, there were some Jews that they were left, they also said, "Hey, maybe we'll stay here. You know, why not? We'll stay there. We're friends." So he says, this is a big novelty. Even them, he wanted to get out. Pharaoh wanted to evict. And also the women, the children, said, "Get out." He gave them all the sheep that they want. Just get out. Your sheep, your flocks, take with them and get out of here, just like you said to, and also give me a blessing. Why give me a blessing? What does Pharaoh want a blessing? Pray on me that I shouldn't die, because I'm also a firstborn. Right? Pharaoh saw that all the firstborn were dying, and he figured maybe he'll be the last firstborn to die. He said, "Get out of here quick and pray." Now, why do they have to get out? Because it says that they didn't want to pray in Egypt. There were too many idols there, so they had to leave in order to pray. The Egyptians pressured the people to hurry up and send them from the land, because they said, "We're all going to die. Everyone is going to die." What does it mean? They said, Moses only said that the firstborn are going to die. And now we're worrying that maybe everybody's going to die, right? Because we see that in every house, there's like 5-6 people dying. They didn't know that it was because that the wife was cheating on the husbands and having relations with all these young people. They didn't know what was going on. They thought that maybe it was more than just the firstborn was dying. The nation, they took the dough before it rose up, and misharotam tzurot, and like the bundles of dough were on they wrapped up in their garments and they put it on their shoulders. Right, the leftover matzah. Okay, now you have to put everything into proper perspective. Again, what is written in the Torah is not necessarily in chronological order. This is the order that God said everyone should do. First of all, the Jews ate they slaughtered the Korban Pesach in the daytime. They ate it in the evening before midnight. They ate it together with matzah and with bitter herbs. That's it. They didn't have to eat matzah anymore. So why did they have to take it out? Why did they have to run out with it? It says because, and they put, it says that, one second, even though they had a lot of animals with them, but they loved the matzot. This was a commandment that they had. And so the leftover matzot, they didn't have to burn. They had to burn the leftover Pesach, lamb. If any lamb was left in the morning, lamb or goat from the Pesach offering that they had to burn, but they could take the matzah. So Rashi said they took it with them because they loved the matzah. That's why. The Jewish people did what Moses said, and they borrowed from the Egyptians vessels of silver and gold and garments. Hey, where did garments come from? So it says, garments, says also these also. In fact, the garments were more valuable to the Egyptians than their silver and gold. It seems they had diamonds in their garments, whatever it is. Whatever is last in the sentence is more important. So it says he took silver, vessels of silver, more valuable as gold, and most valuable are garments. And it says that the Egyptians forced the Jews to take more than what they wanted. And God gave grace in the eyes of the Egyptians. The Egyptians loved, all of a sudden they loved the Jews, and they emptied out Egypt. Now, it says that what did they do? Vayashilu, it says, Vayashilu, they borrowed from the Egyptians vessels. They borrowed from the Egyptians. Now, the OrHachiam says something very, very interesting. He says over here, maybe I should perish. Lolan Adman, they didn't do it for the sake of money. They did it why? Why here? Bnei Israel, Kedvar Moshe, that they took the money because Moses told them to. The Jewish people did not desire the money, but because Moses commanded to them. Not only that, says a very interesting thing. The Jewish people did it because Moses told them to. What does it mean Moses told them to? It was a sin. You're not allowed to steal money from a non-Jew. You're not allowed to lie to a non-Jew and steal money. It's forbidden. Moses told them to steal and to lie. Okay, the Egyptians owed them money, etc. But take them to court. You can't just go and trick people and start lying, right, in order to get it back. And not only that, these individual Egyptians that they took money from, they didn't personally own them money necessarily. Paro owed them money. He kept them slaves. So it says, the Rambam, he brings down that if a prophet tells you to do something against the Torah, except for idolatry or murder or something, but if he tells you to do something according to the Torah, there he says only idolatry. If a prophet tells you to do something one time against the Torah, if it's called Horoat Shah, just one time, like Elijah the prophet made sacrifices on the Mount of Carmel. You can't make sacrifices when there's a holy temple. In the time of Elijah the prophet, that was in the middle of the first temple. You can't make sacrifices, but he told them to make sacrifices on Mount Carmel in order to knock down the idolaters. So that's okay. So that's what it says. Moses told the Jewish people to do a sin, to lie to the Egyptians, to steal from the Egyptians, to do it one time, it's okay. Right? It was all right to do it. Why? Because they did it because Moses told them a prophet can negate a commandment temporarily. That's what he did. And God gave grace to the people, and they took out everything from Egypt. Lamed. And the Jewish people went to Ramses Sukkosa, 600,000 men, except for the children. Rashi says 600,000 men means from 20 years and up. Now, there's other places where it says from 20 to 60. And if I remember correctly, and maybe I don't, Rashi does not say from 20 to 60. He always says from 20 years old and up. But in fact, that's what it is. It says all the soldiers, and the soldiers could only be from 20 to 60. When they're 60, they had to stop. Okay, whatever it is. They went 120 miles, and they did it in 1 hour. But that's pretty fast, 120 miles an hour, because God said, I will bear you on wings of eagles. So we see that they left very quickly. And also, Erev Rav Alaitam. There was also a group called the Erev Rav. Who is this Erev Rav? The Erev Rav is, says Rashi, these are, Rashi doesn't say. The Erev Rav, Ibn Ezra. The Ibn Ezra says, I skipped. Here it is. I'm sorry. Erev Rav, who is the Erev Rav? Says the Rashi, these are all sorts of other nations of converts. Ibn Ezra said that these are Egyptians, and they got mixed up with the Jews because they wanted to leave. Later on, they're called the Safsuf. The Safsuf are like the dregs of humanity. They made trouble all the time. The Jewish people baked this matzah that they took from Egypt. They made it into matzahs because it couldn't become chametz because they were driven out of Egypt and they couldn't delay, and also they didn't take any food with them. It says this tells us the praises of the Jewish people, says Rashi, that they didn't say, how can we go out into the desert? We don't have any food. But they believed and they went, and it ended up that it came out okay. God provided for them manna from heaven. That's what the prophet Jeremiah says. What did they get the yes? That shows the Jewish people are a holy nation. They devoted themselves. They relied totally on the Creator of the world. And now it says there is Maimonim and Chassidus about this, that they took it out of Egypt. It couldn't become chametz. Why? Because they were driven out of Egypt. So in Chassidut, they explain how long does it take dough to become chametz? It takes like 18 minutes. And if it's hot, it's even less time. So let's say 18 minutes. So for certainly there was enough time for the dough to rise up. So it says the reason is because, here it explains later, it explains in the Haggadah of Pesach, because God revealed himself in Egypt to smite the firstborn, and when he did that, nothing could rise up. Chometz, leavened bread, is a metaphor for egotism, and there couldn't be any egotism, not even in the bread. And that's why when they left Egypt, they would have liked to take chometz, but they couldn't. They couldn't because it didn't rise up. This is going to opinion that it was only forbidden to take chometz with them on the first day. Okay, in any case, there's different answers about this, why it gives this reason that they took only chometz, that they took only matzah out. It says the reason given here is because they didn't have any time to delay. They didn't have any time. They were pushed out, so they had to cook really fast, and they couldn't wait for the dough to rise up. The time that the Jewish people were in Egypt was 330 and 400 years. 130 years. Well, I mean, if you make a calculation, you'll see that it was not that much time. Calculations just from the time of the Yaakov, etc., was born, it's less than that. So it means this is the time, 103. Another place also, it says that the Jewish people were in Egypt for 400 years, not 430. So it says 430 years, that's from the time that God promised Abraham. Remember, he made this covenant with Abraham between the pieces. That's 430 years. That was 30 years before Isaac was born. When Isaac was born, that's when really the exile started, so to speak. That's when the promise was. that you're going to have children and they're going to be slaves. So the children, that began when Isaac was born. That was 400 years before they went into Egypt, before they left Egypt. 400 years before they left. So let's just begin the Rashi. It says 330 and 400 years from the time that Yitzchak was born was only 400 years. Namely, when Abraham had children, then it could begin this promise of God that your children are going to be slaves in a strange land. So this is when Abraham had children. It started. But it doesn't say 400 years. It was 400 years from the birth of Isaac. Where'd you get the other 30? This is 30 years from when God made the promise until Yitzchak, before Yitzchak was born. So 430 years. After 430 years, and that very day, the Jews, all of their hosts, remember this is what we learned in the morning in the Chassidut class, all of the hosts of God left the land of Israel, left the land of Egypt, left for the land of Israel. They left the land of Egypt. Rashi says, at the end of, etc., etc., this tells you that everything was exact. God did not delay one moment. On the 15th day of Nisan, the angels came to Abraham and tell him that he was going to have a child. 1 year later, at the 15th day of Nisan, Yitzchak was born. And on the 15th day of Nisan, there was the Gazette 30 years earlier, 30 years earlier, exactly on the 15th day of Nisan, there was the decree of the Bein HaBetorim that God promised Abraham that they were going to be. It was a night of watching. God took the Jews out of, this is the watching for all of the Jewish people to get out of Egypt. And now God explains what are the laws of the Passover offering. It says that called ben nechar lo yochal bo, a person that does not believe in God. He says shenit nakru ma'asav me'avot, a Jew that does not believe in God cannot eat from the Pesach offering. Ben nechar. So Rashi says, Ben nechar shenit nakru ma'asav me'aviv, that it was a Jew that his deeds are removed from his Father in heaven. Person doesn't believe in God. Whether it's really a non-Jew or whether it's a Jew that's what's called a mumar, a Jew which is an apostate. It says even if a person has a servant that's bought with money, Jews could have non-Jewish servants. They say you have to circumcise them, then the servant can eat from it. A toshav, a zachir, yochabo, a ger toshav, in other words, a non-Jew that lives in Israel, and a non-Jew that if they're circumcised, then they're allowed to eat from the the offering. It has to be eaten in one house. You can't take any of it outside. Now, like I told you, there's 20 commandments in this week's Torah portion, but we haven't really got time to go over all of them because I want to do the Haftorah also. All the Jewish people should make it. And if there is with you a convert, he should also make the Pesach to God. He has to circumcise all of the males in the house. Then he can do it. He'll be like one of the Jewish people. And anyone who is not circumcised cannot eat it. Even if a person is not circumcised for medical reasons or for whatever, nevertheless, that's it. You can't. One Torah should be for the Ezrach and for the converts that are among you. And all the Jewish people made the Pesach offering, just like God commanded Moses and Aaron, so they all did. And that very day, God took all of the Jews from the land of Israel, from the land of Egypt. I don't know why I keep making that same mistake. God took all of the Jews from Egypt, al tziv'otam, and all of their hosts. They were all taken out of Egypt. And we said, this was the sentence we learned about in Torah Or in the morning, with all the sparks of Egypt. There was 288 sparks, mystical sparks, that fell in the creation of the world. God made, and the Jews, the suffering the Jews made in Egypt, and nevertheless the faith that they had in God, this elevated 202 of these sparks. That's what it means, that Sivotam, that's the hosts are all these sparks. Good. There's more here, a little bit more in the Torah portion, but I would like to do the Haftorah. So let's stop here.